citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis. Last evening, I asked His Excellency our Governor General to declare a state of emergency. Effective 7 p.m. today, Saturday, March 28, 2020, all citizens and residents will be subject to a curfew between the hours of 7 p.m. and 5 a.m. each day for the next 14 days. This is part of our scaled-up response to contain COVID-19 and minimize harm to our people. The emergency powers COVID-19 regulations provide for every person to remain confined to their place of residence, inclusive of their yard space, to avoid contact outside of their family, except in stipulated circumstances, for example, essential travel to the doctor, to the grocery store, the bank, the credit union, money services, business, pharmacy, or to refuel their vehicles. The regulations provide for the closure of non-essential businesses and regulate the hours of opening for essential services. Specifically, Section 5 enumerates the businesses which can open and their hours of business. Wholesale or retail grocery stores, commercial bakeries, or fruit and vegetable vendors shall open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The regulations further stipulate that for the first 2 hours of shopping, seniors, disabled persons, and essential workers with identification shall be granted priority. Doctors' offices, hospitals and medical facilities, pharmacies and medical establishments, gas stations shall open from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Hardware stores shall open from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Hotels, excluding any casinos, spas, gyms, discotheques, and restaurants therein. However, such restaurants may offer takeaway or room service. Banks, credit unions, and money service businesses shall open from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Mondays to Thursdays, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Fridays. Commercial ports and related businesses between 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., subject to any variation by the port's authority. Airports, subject to Regulation 10. Commercial courier flights, businesses licensed to provide security guard services, takeaway food vendors shall open from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. The National Caribbean Insurance Company or health insurance companies and such other businesses or undertakings as may be specifically exempted in writing by the Commissioner of Police. As part of the stepped-up response, we have imposed social and physical distancing protocols as part of our plan to protect you. Businesses will be required to observe a physical distance of 6 feet between its customers in and outside of their businesses. With respect to the public service, all essential workers must report to work. The Secretary of Cabinet will determine any other category required to report for duty. Given the congestion in public transport vehicles and the potential for contagion, we have imposed certain restrictions to protect operators of public transport and their patrons. Our National Working Group on COVID-19 met yesterday with bus operators of the 3 bus lines and ferry operators to discuss matters in relation to COVID-19. I am advised that they were generally supportive of our measures to protect the lives of our people. The Cabinet remains concerned about allegations that persons are not faithfully complying with the quarantine restrictions. We cannot have anyone compromise the health and well-being, and indeed the life of others. In this regard, I must advise that strong penalties, including fines of up to $5,000 or a term of imprisonment, can be imposed on those who fail to comply with the regulations. I hope that good sense will prevail. We recognize that these are unusual measures which restrict the free movement of our people. However, we are in an unprecedented time, and the dangers that confront our nation demand that government takes the serious measures to confront and overcome this pandemic soonest. I emphasize that these strong measures are for 14 days in the first instance, and we shall continue to evaluate and adapt as necessary as the situation evolves. As we face this monument, but I ask that each and every one of us bend our knees and bow our heads as we seek God's grace and protection. As Prime Minister, I commit that I shall do what's right for the people of this my beloved Federation. Your best interest is my guide. Let us continue to be calm and to confront this crisis together. I am confident that God will not forsake us and that together we shall overcome. May God bless the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, and may He keep us safe. I thank you.
Federation, Mr. Vincent Byron, and we want to say a very good afternoon to you. Prime Minister, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Clive, and thanks for having us this afternoon on this program.
Thank you very much for being here, sir. And Mr. Byron, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too, Clive, and to all your listeners in Radio Land.
Well, thank you very much. I want to say good afternoon as well to our colleagues who have joined us. We're trying to share as much information as we can. So good afternoon to our listeners who may be a lot of stations, ZIZ, Freedom, wherever you are listening to us. Thank you very much for being a part of this exercise this afternoon. And of course, the declaration today of a state of emergency, the Prime Minister has more to say on that, so he's going to go without any more preamble from me, straight to the Prime Minister. Mr. Prime Minister?
Well, thank you very much. The declaration of the state of emergency had become absolutely necessary to safeguard life in the country. What we are dealing here with is a pandemic that has engulfed the world and has largely undermined the existence of mankind everywhere. The most powerful countries in the world economically are the United States of America, China, Japan, and we could go on a number of countries in the European Union or part of the OECD. And these are the largest economies. Each of them have been battered by the pandemic in the last couple of months. We moved from December from an epidemic to sometime in March being declared as a pandemic, which meant it has wide global repercussions and implications. And we have seen every region now of the global community being battered, including the Caribbean region. And what we have set out to do from day one, first element of the strategy to protect our people in St. Kitts and Nevis was to keep this virus at bay for as long as possible. And in that regard, we relied on the experts' advice of local health personalities, the advice which had come from CARPA, the regional health experts body on issues of public health, and we rely, of course, on the global entity, the World Health Organization. We were able to keep the virus at bay for as long as we did, that we received commendation globally and in international press as being the last one in the Americas who was able to keep the virus at bay. For that, we want to give God thanks and to commend the excellent leadership of our National Working Group on COVID-19, the CMO, and the public at large for responding in a satisfactory way to the initial efforts of preparation. We moved beyond that phase to another phase. Another phase came immediately, for it was not if, but when we will have the virus. And the strategy was keep it away from your shore as long as possible. So very early when we started introducing advisory, we were going against the grain of experiences elsewhere, where some countries are determined they will not close down their ports, they will do nothing, by and large, because the economic agenda was going to be undermined. We say life first, and that we couldn't put a price on life. We said very early that it was better to stop the cruise ship than allow them to come, for the taximan to make a few hundreds or even $1,000, and later on their health had become compromised. So we took certain decisions that helped with that. Once we discovered 2 positive cases, then the situation, of course, changed dramatically. We were now living in the real world where we had to upscale, increase the actions that we were taking in a more aggressive way to ensure that we were able to contain and mitigate the effect of the virus. Where we are at now is that the government has determined that without the direction of the state, enough of our citizens and residents would not do the right thing. In other words, where you have people acting in a cavalier manner, where you have people not respecting social distancing protocols, where you have people, by and large, not taking quarantining and isolation with the seriousness that it deserves, it called for an upping of the statal action. And so, by and large, the state of emergency then was one element we had in our repertoire to be able to, one, call the country into attention that it could not be life as it was yesterday, that a new way of socialization and a new way of interacting with each other had to come on stream. The curfew which we introduced Well, the Governor General, which will take effect from this evening at 7, is to help to signal that. The truth is, by the state of emergency powers, the regulations, we are seeking to keep as many people home, away from jobs, away from any setting in which you are going to have too large a number of persons in a confined space. And in that regard, I want to look at a particular section of the regulation. And it is, if you bear with me for 1 minute, Section 7 of the Emergency Powers COVID-19 regulations. It said subject to sub-regulation 2, and in an effort to prevent the spread of the novel coronavirus or COVID-19, every person, and that phrase is very important, every person shall remain confined to their place of residence, inclusive of their yard space, to avoid contact outside of their family, except in some 4 exceptions that have been identified. In other words, the preferred mode is that people stay at home. And there are exceptions, because we understand that man is a social being. Man is part of the nucleus of the family. Except outside of that, to go outside that, we say in Section 7, you must be classified as essential workers and you have to go to work. In other words, if you have no work to do, stay at home, please. Be careful at home. Follow the necessary health protocols. A second category exempted, workers required to work under Regulation 4 and Regulation 5. We go to Regulation 5, and Regulation 5 identified a number of businesses and other entities that were critical to life going on, life and living. And I'll just name a few. One of them is that if you're going to the doctor office, the hospital, and the medical facilities, then it was all right for you to leave your home. The reasonableness of that is self-evident, because health and health services are being provided by these facilities. It says if you're going then to the pharmacy and for medical supply, all those things provided an exemption. Life doesn't stop. You need to fill up your gas station. You do it within a prescribed period of time. So come 5 o'clock, nobody should be at any of the gas stations buying gas, because that facility should be closed. And we could go on and on. You may have to do services at the banks, your credit union, and we have designated the hours for which you could be out dealing with these particular services. The first one in 5 is wholesale or retail stores. Someone may ask, well, why is that? And we say, because life must continue. So even while we want you to be at home, we understand practically that you need to get your bread, you need to get your rice, you may need your chicken wings and your saltfish. And so provision has been made for these things to happen. So the first message we want to send, stay at home unless you have a legitimate reason to move outside. And that is captured under Section 2, shelter in place. Stay at home as often as you can. It's necessary to do a number of things like work, like attending to the doctor, the grocery store, etc., etc. They are enumerated very clearly. And we also provide an opportunity for you to be out of doors for purposes of exercise, whether alone or together with family members living under the same roof between the hours of 5 and 6. Again, it is that if you are a living being, part of the health prescription is diet, it is exercise, etc., etc. And so the regulations provide for that. So we have come a long way. It is in a sense a fundamental restriction or restriction on fundamental freedom. But it has become necessary and urgent at this particular moment in time to allow us the space to contain, to control the virus, and to put in place all other necessaries that will help us to defeat it in a quick time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. Attorney General, you're up next. And of course, the question is, declaring a state of emergency, what are the measures that apply in the circumstances where there's no resolution of Parliament? Just explain to our listeners, because they send me these questions and I'm a lay person, so I have to ask people who know.
That's correct, Clive. Under our Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, there is Section 19 of the Constitution that gives to the Governor General the power to proclaim and declare that for the purposes of this chapter, state of emergency exists either in St. Christopher and Nevis or in a part of St. Christopher and Nevis. So the Prime Minister has asked the Governor General, bearing in mind that we have this crisis, this health emergency, to declare a state of emergency. And the Governor General, having considered that, felt that there was reasonableness in that request and declared this state of emergency under Section 19, subsection 1 of the Constitution. It also is allowed for in the legislation that emanates from that section of the Constitution, because there is an Emergency Powers Act, and that's Chapter 19.02 of the Constitution, of that law, of our laws of St. Kitts and Nevis. And under Section 3.1 of that, those Emergency Powers Act, it gives him that power as well to be able to declare a state of emergency. So there is constitutional and legislative underpinning of the state of emergency, given the very dire circumstances that the Prime Minister has just clearly spoken to our people. I think that citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis have been fully aware of the last few weeks of the evolving situation. It's very fluid, and as it's become more and more serious, there has been significant preparation and planning by our public servants who have been mandated to do that, whether in health, security, other forms, disaster management. And they have made recommendations to the Cabinet. This has been considered, and the Prime Minister's chair of the Cabinet has been able to get consensus from members of the Cabinet to support the state of emergency, which we believe that our people will support in the interest of good public health.
And AJ, you know, I think you expect that the majority of people, not everyone, will comply. What do you want to say to those who are restive, who like to try a thing, as we say in the Caribbean, in terms of you're trying to do something for the collective, which requires everyone to be on board? What about those people who may decide they're going to test you?
Well, the Prime Minister spoke to that in his speech, in his address to the nation, when he announced the state of the emergency. And he explained that under the Emergency Powers Act, a set of regulations have been published and gazetted. These regulations have been named the Emergency Powers COVID-19 regulations. And it sets out, as he has read, some of the provisions of those regulations. But most importantly, to answer your question, number 15, Regulation 15, speaks to a penalty if people were to breach these regulations. And it says, and I read, a person who contravenes or fails to comply with these regulations shall be liable on summary conviction to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or a term of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or to both, and to forfeiture of any goods or money in respect of which the offense has been committed. So that if you're not an essential business and you don't fall within the ambit of the regulations, you may well find that the goods that you are peddling can be confiscated, as well as you can be summoned to appear before the magistrate's court, and upon conviction you could be given a fine as well as a term imprisonment.
And Mr. Prime Minister, the issue of essential services, I know you said you would expand on that at some stage. I have a few questions for you. One, major workers, a friend of mine asked me to ask you if people are starting to work this evening at perhaps a station you may be familiar with, sir, whether they'll be allowed to travel during the curfew time. The other question has to do with those who provide services like flow, the cable, digital, whether they'll be allowed to operate on a daily basis, knowing that they offer top-ups and so on. So those are just two questions I've been asked to ask you.
Thanks. I'll make an effort to answer, although the learned Attorney General is better put. But my understanding of the powers really is that under Regulation 7, subsection 2, at O, among those considered essential services would be water, electricity, or other sector encompassing the provision of electronic communications, including print and electronic media. So under that rubric, flow, Digicel, the cable, etc., are certainly covered, and in my view, they can be reasonably construed as essential services given where we're at this time in our development. I should just want, before the AG comes in, to add that all, I repeat, all essential workers shall at all times carry personal identification. So where people are going to be out and they're pursuing an essential service, they must have an identification, and better yet too, any other documentation that would help the officer who may intervene receive satisfaction that they have a legitimate purpose in breaking the curfew hours, so to speak. But the Honorable Attorney General is here.
Just to add, Clive, that the Prime Minister has clearly stated and referred to telecommunications, but electronic communications also means print media and electronic media that will cover newspapers, journalists work in the electronic media, and radio personalities who have to serve the public and bring the news and inform the public as to developments in the country so that they can be well informed.
So the issue of public transportation, that's another big question I've been asked. Buses, of course, will be crowded places. You're talking about social distancing, as somebody put it the other day, state so, which is the local explanation for social distancing. I don't know. I leave that to you. How do you plan to deal with the issue of public transportation, in particular buses that ply their trade? You said there was a discussion, Mr. Prime Minister, with the bus owners. Are you able to elaborate?
Well, yesterday we were advised that the head of the National Working Group Task Force on COVID-19 would have met with operators of buses. Indeed, I am advised that he would have met with the 3 bus lines which we have on St. Kitts. He would have met with ferry operators and to sensitize them as to what his thinking or the committee's thinking was in relation to buses. Buses usually are congested space. And we start from the fact that we want to minimize that as much as possible. And we want to do so for the protection and for the health of every passenger, including the bus driver. So what we have sought to do in this SRO, at SRO number 13, we cover the issue of public transport. And what we attempt to do is, based on practice elsewhere, is to have a dramatic reduction in the number of persons that can be on a ferry on a bus or any other form of public transport. I will want to read the record for exactitude. Regulation 3 at subsection 1. No person shall offer for hire or seek to travel on any motor omnibus unless there is or would be not more than one passenger in the row one passenger per row in the motor omnibus in a staggered formation. In other words, if we say we go into the bus, there can be no more than one person per row. So, and we want that to be in a staggered fashion. So, for example, if one is over there at my far left in the first row, on the second row, we would expect that the passenger would be on my far right. So we are having a staggered formation, zigzag, if you will, in relation to the motor buses. That would give each passenger at least some breathing space. So if someone were to sneeze, someone were to cry, someone were to become emotional or physical in any way, it gives you somewhat of a buffer. And that is what was discussed with the bus operators and the ferry operators yesterday. Thankfully, they understood that this was being done for their protection and that they needed to comply with this for their own safety, for that of their families and their friends who this virus, if it is in the bus and they become infected with it, they can transmit it to others. So I want to give a word of applause and commendation to all the bus operators and ferry operators for understanding that we are in a new world order in terms of socialization, and we have to be more careful and more circumspect with one another and respectful now of space. Physical space and other spaces now are critical as we pursue hygiene. Equally, we are saying to them, it's not just enough to create the staggered spacing that improves upon the healthy situation in terms of the transportation, but also we want you to have sanitizers available for your passengers. We want you to regularly wipe the doorknobs or any space that a passenger would touch. Again, all these are tips to assist in keeping each of us safe. I want us not to think that because we do not take the bus, we are safe if the bus operator does not comply. That would be taking your health for granted. Because the way in which we socialize, through restaurants, through our supermarkets, at our playing field, at work, anyone who have moved in a particular circle can come into contact with us or our friends or our family or our children. And in that regard, even without knowing, become part of the pool of probable cases that now may succumb in one way or the other to the virus. So each one of us has a duty of care to ourselves and to every other person. And that is why we need greater vigilance in the society. I say that to say, if you have a cousin come back from the US of A who should have been out of quarantine and is not observing that, you have a duty of care to report that to a health official so that action can be taken. In doing all of these things, we help keep our beloved Federation safer and stronger for the future.
To the issue of visitation, you have someone who's not feeling so well, you haven't seen him for a while, you kind of miss them, even though you may be in contact via phone. There are prohibitions on visits to quarantine sites. Am I correct, sir?
Yes, they are, and that is at Regulation 14. This morning, a young man from Bastille called and he said, Mr. Prime Minister, I want to visit someone in a particular rural area. I said, to my knowledge, that person is under quarantine, but I need to have a conversation. I said, it is not allowed. It is not allowed. Again, we want people really, just keep yourself busy at home, watching TV, cleaning your home, reading a poem to your children. Stay at home as much as possible. Observe all healthy practices and proper hygiene, and as it were, avoid contact with others. I would let the Attorney General go to Regulation 14 and just for information, read and perhaps explain what is behind the restrictions that are enumerated at Regulation 14, subsection 1, A, B to C.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Those restrictions on visitation state, no person shall visit or be permitted to visit A, any place of quarantine or isolation station. B, a patient in a hospital or residential care establishment or facility, including an elderly nursing home. And C, a detainee in prison. Just to go back to A, where we speak about quarantine and isolation, we have had a situation where those who would have landed at the airport initially and were screened and were found to have come from an area where there may have been a hotspot or someplace, they were asked to quarantine themselves, to self-quarantine. And this, we felt, where people would have been disciplined enough to go home and lock themselves in a room and have no interaction with their family. We have learned that everybody did not do that. And so it has become more difficult. If that person developed symptoms, became asymptomatic, they would then be tested. So tests were done on those who may have had a fever, who may have had a sneezing or coughing, and a medical practitioner felt we should test this person to see if they had the virus. That is where tests were being ordered and done. So whereas we would have had more than, up to yesterday, over 300 people in quarantine, some 51 tests had been done to date, up to yesterday. These were sent off to the Caribbean Public Health Authority, CARFA, in Trinidad, and we have received a number of tests have returned, most negative, but to date we have just had 2 confirmed cases with the virus. That is what where we are today. But there is a distinction between quarantine and isolation. If it is that you are a confirmed case, you would then be isolated. You should not come into contact with anybody. And isolation, of course, becomes even more critical if somebody has developed the sickness and needs to be hospitalized, so that no one would be allowed to visit them under those circumstances. So there's that distinction of the seriousness. Quarantining, we want, as the Prime Minister has said most repeatedly, we need to keep people understand that you must keep your distance because the transmission goes from person to person. And of course, those who are elderly, those who have underlying conditions, asthma, diabetes, other forms, they are particularly susceptible. And we would not want them to contract this virus, because while some may contract it in a mild form and recover, those who are more vulnerable become more difficult. And so it is very important that people take this very seriously. And of course, where somebody is detained in prison and are basically without any sort of recourse, we have to protect them, that doesn't spread like wildfire in an institution like the prison.
Let me add with respect to that, and again, we understand that we are changing the norm. Because basically, when people are in the hospital, people are in prison, by and large, loved ones want to go, show consideration, love, and care. all that we are saying, in this environment, those normal, kind, charitable, and loving actions can be pursued in the same way. Because if you go to the elderly in the hospital, she may become infected with the virus. And so the very one that you love, you are going to be hurting, and you may even be hurting yourself. So that is why we have put in this restriction. And we ask persons really for 14 days of your life and our lives. Please abide by them. Avoid going to the prison. There is nothing that you can do other than to add to troubles there. What we have determined internally, we will allow the prisoners greater access to the phones in a managed way so that they can touch base with their loved ones outside. We know from the stats and from the experiences elsewhere, yes, if there are any encouraging element, 80% of the persons who would have contracted the virus, they will have that, as it were, control in a controlled way, no need for hospitalization, and largely they would go along their normal way, almost akin to a flu. We know that 20% of the persons, though, will have it more severely, and we know from that 20%, about 5% are going to have it in a horrible way, and they may require ICU and other treatments, and a percentage of those may die. We are trying to minimize the adversity, the fatalities from happening, and we are asking for everyone in society to be conscious. It is not just about you, but the other persons with whom you come into contact. So this is an important provision, and we know our people can do it for 14 days. I have faith in them. There have been moments in the past when the prison was under lockdown, no one allowed to go. This is a bad situation in which we are in, disrupting lives, disrupting economies, disrupting societies as we know it. And it is bringing the most powerful country into the perception that is disorganized and unready. So if this can humble the greatest economy in the world, if this could shut down India, if this pandemic could shut down Italy, if this pandemic could have persons in the UK crying out that they do not have enough support, enough resources to do their work, imagine what it can do to a small, open economy with limited resources. How much worse it will do to us unless we work together to defeat it.
Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Attorney General, I thank you very much. We're going to hear from our partners, give you a chance to catch your breath, have a drink of water. We'll come right back to you in just a moment.
Imagine a place that has all that you need, all of the things for your business to succeed. Furniture, copiers, laptops and more. TDC Business Center is your #1 store. Print and copy and scan and fax. Our copy center does all of that. If you're having a party and you need chairs and tents, you've got all your needs and grand rentals for rent. The TDC Business Center has everything your business needs. Superior copy and printing services, business equipment and furniture, and a wide array of renting materials for all occasions. TDC Business Center, providing solutions that work.
In our pledge to keep everyone connected while helping to lessen the economic impact as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the cable for the next 60 days will 1. Increase the speed of the entry-level broadband package from 6 megabits to 10 megabits. 2. Reduce the price of the flash and bolt packages by 20%. The flash package from $97 to $77. The bolt package from $139 to $109. 3. Reopen the free Wi-Fi hotspots in Bastia. 4. Waive late fees. 5. Waive installation fees. This period is challenging for everyone, but is also an opportunity for the entire nation to come together and rally as one to overcome this crisis. Let's all do our part, maintain hope, and get through this together. Keep safe.
And I rise up, I rise like the day. I rise up, I rise unafraid. I rise up.
You're tuned to WinFM 90.9 on your dial, www.winnfm.com. WinFM 98.9, and we're with the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis and the Attorney General of St. Kitts and Nevis. You have an opportunity now to pose your questions. The Prime Minister and the Attorney General has kindly consented to be here to hear from you. Our numbers are 4660989, 6620989, 7620989. Overseas numbers 0333 0333 344 0065. 718-285-6984, 305-921-4619. Those numbers, of course, are on our website, www.winnfm.com. You go to the phone lines, call it good afternoon. You're with the Prime Minister and the Attorney General.
Maintain hope and get to...
All right, caller, you need to turn your radio down and call back. We're standing by for your calls. You're live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Hi, how are you? How are you guys?
We're doing fine. Good afternoon to
All
you.
right, this is Sister Cynthia. As you know, I'm a DJ, and, I work in the night with media. What would we have to do in terms of coming out in the evening to come to the radio station to work?
Lady Cynthia, good to hear you.
Oh.
And we
How are you?
commend you for your work in the
Thank
media.
you.
You can get coverage in that we have special provision for media workers under, I think it is Regulation 7, subsection 20, 200, and it basically you're identified as an essential worker, and in that regard, there is, if you will, a waiver of some of the restrictions. You will be required to have always on you some form of ID. And additionally, I would suggest, though it is not specifically said in the regulation, it will be good to have a letter from your employer indicating that you are engaged in media work. And that would help.
Next question before you go, because I don't want to tie up the time. I know a lot of people want to try to call in, but someone else asked me about fishermen. Like, if you are a fisherman and you want to go out and do fishing, how do they go about doing something like that? Because I know sometimes, fishermen go out either sometime early morning or late evening. So, how would they do something like that?
I will pass that one to the Attorney General.
Okay.
So we understand that there needs to be living. It's for a short period, 2 weeks, but we would have to get the fishermen to try to get, as it was, some identification and a pass through whether it's Marine Division or whatever government agency. So that can be done by a special dispensation through the Commission of Police. The regulations allows for the Commission of Police in some circumstances to specifically exempt certain businesses and undertakings depending on what these are. This can be seen under Section 5N of the regulations. So there is legislative basis for this to be had, for them to get a pass to be able to do that.
Just to add, Cynthia, in relation to that, they will have to also convince the Commissioner of Police that they are going to adhere to social distancing and physical distancing protocols. So it's not that they are going out there, full up the boat, and the spacing requirements are not observed. So that provision really is also part of the legislation. It said, provided the owner or operator of an establishment specified in the paragraph A to N shall adhere to social distancing and physical distancing protocols as set out in the regulation. So we just want people to exercise even a bit more care than they normally would at all times. And we're asking for a limited period of time. Could someone not make a sacrifice for 14 days? They may add 14 years to all our lives. And that is
And
the
I don't-
choice that we are caught up in.
I do agree, and I must commend you for what you did. I mean, there's some people who's just not going to agree, but people don't understand what this is doing to our life. And so,
Yes.
put aside politics, put aside everything. I think that the step that you made this morning is for the betterment of all of us, and it's something that, it should have been done, and I'm happy that you finally took that step to do it, because they don't understand what is happening in the world, and that's what they need to understand. But anyway, thank you, and, God bless you, and continue on your show. Bye-bye.
Bless
Okay,
you.
bye-bye. Thanks for
Continue being
calling.
an inspiration.
Much appreciated. Let's go back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon to you.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Backus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. The Prime Minister's here, Attorney General. Yes.
Yes. Now, I have a problem with the curfew. And I'm going to show you why. When there's a hurricane, one of the things people does is come out after the storm to look around, survey, whatever the situation is. To me, it doesn't make sense to have a night curfew because 5 o'clock, those same people is going to come out, mingle, go to work, do everything, and then 7 o'clock in the evening, you lock them down again. That don't make sense. It's either you're going to do it properly or not. China did it properly.
What is your suggestion?
They shut. Huh?
What is your suggestion? What are you suggesting?
If you're going to shut it down, shut it down. You cannot have people in a curfew in the night and then come back out to mingle with people again the next day. It doesn't make any sense.
All right.
Either you're going to shut the place down or not.
All right. Thank you very much for your contribution. We go back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon. Hi, caller. You're live on the air. Good afternoon.
Yes, greetings.
Greetings.
Greetings to your guests in studio,
Greetings.
honorable guests in studio.
Greetings.
Well, we just called to say all the best to all of us,
Yes.
we notice with all what is happening, only politics in a skill go on, and it's unfortunate, very unfortunate. And we see it coming from both sides of the fence. I must say all the sides of the fence, because we have more than two. But we just have to just do the right thing, unite, and go through this thing here, and we can see it through. It too will pass, And once again, all the best to everyone.
Thank you for calling. Much appreciated. Back to the phone lines we go. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Mr. Backus.
Mr. Adams, good afternoon.
And good afternoon to the Honorable Prime Minister and our Attorney General, Juicy Byron.
Good afternoon, my brother.
Prime Minister,
Yes.
I'm calling in because I'm a concerned citizen. I'm in the vulnerable group because I'm already 67. So I don't want to be at the borders of our frontier. The reason why I'm calling in, sir, I heard you mention that you're going to be employing persons in immigration and customs, additional persons, and I believe those are your words. Sir, hear my advice. Do not employ rookies or square pegs in round holes. This is a critical time, and you don't need them. What do you need is to employ retired persons with at least 10 years experience. Mark my words. With at least 10 years experience. That is what you need. That is fair advice from me to you. Lastly, I heard the Minister of Tourism tangling up himself at your press conference. Control of pleasure crafts is under the Customs Act, which is number 2014 and number 19 of 2014. Section 23 in that act speaks to pleasure craft, but there needs for regulations. That is the only how you can control pleasure craft. There are needs for regulations. And I'm doing this as a concerned citizen. I say again, and I don't want nobody to say that Adams want to go back at customs. No. I'm too old for that. I'm 67. And I'm in the vulnerable group. I'm sure you heard that. But I see some mistakes coming. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. We hear from the Prime Minister and Attorney General in just a moment. We're going to get some callers in. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Oh,
Hello?
I'm too old for that. I'm 67.
Hello, caller. Need to turn on your radio. All right. Let's take somebody else. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon. All right. Well, do call back. Let's go to the Prime Minister and the Attorney General for some responses.
Well, to start, I want to thank Terry Adams. He has made a very useful contribution and brought his experience as a long-serving officer in the Customs and Excise Department. Certainly, we are open to consider the contribution that experienced persons who have served in the customs can make and can use to contribute to the issues we are now dealing with. Indeed, specifically with respect to the health sector, we have made a public appeal for all retired nurses who feel fit and able to come forward to assist us in buffeting, in strengthening the human resource capacity in that particular sector. And a similar undertaking I could make now as the Minister responsible for Finance. If there are anyone out there with experience in customs and excise wanting to make a contribution, we will consider an opportunity for you to serve. Please let us know. Address your communication to the Chief Personnel Officer, to the Controller of Customs, and feel free to copy me on that, and we will give it good consideration. So I want to thank Terry with respect to that matter. When persons are employed without experience, it is the responsibility of the head of the department to ensure that they go through that learning process to get them ready and that they get the best tutelage, the best advice, the best supervision. Sometimes it is not always possible to have people with experience. And the young, if they are ever to get the experience, would need someone to take a chance on them. So it is a balancing act. The matter of the pleasure craft, I don't know. We have Mr. Samuel Abdias, the chairperson of our national working group, and COVID would want to add something on that, but I've taken note of the advice of Mr. Adams at face value that this is under the purview of the Controller of Customs. I therefore would also ask Mr. Kennedy de Silva to provide me some information with respect to this particular matter. Abdias, you want to say something on that?
Sure. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Good morning, Clive Backus, and to all your listeners. I'm sorry, good afternoon now, Sir AG.
We understand.
Yes. Been up early and going. Yes. Honorable Prime Minister, thank you for the opportunity to come on here and address the general public. In our preparedness measures, one of the areas the Controller of Customs, Coast Guard, Chief Immigration Officer, who are part of the National Working Group, the task force, we identified that one of the challenges was the pleasure crafts. We met with the yachting community, and they themselves brought it to our attention as well. And the Controller of Customs, the Chief Immigration Officer, and the Coast Guard made the contribution to the Permanent Secretary of National Security, who then submitted a document to Cabinet, which Cabinet approved, which limit the movement of the pleasure craft to 6 ports in the Federation. Those ports are New Guinea, Deepwater Port at Boardwalk, Port Zante, and Christophe Harbour in St. Kitts. In Nevis, it was the Charleston Pier and the Long Point Pier. So the NOTAM went out to all the crafts using all the mediums, Maritime Affairs and everyone, to let them know this is the stance, and also to let them know the travel advisory that was in existence. And the reason for that was that there was everybody was coming to St. Kitts because we didn't have a confirmed case. So the Coast Guard was busy intercepting a lot of vessels that were coming into our waters. So we took that measure in place, applied all the necessary existing regulations, as Mr. Adams mentioned, through the Customs and Excise Department, Coast Guard, and Immigration, and we were successful in ensuring that no one entered our borders.
Thank you. Additionally, to beef up, we are in negotiations with a private entity for the provision of drone services that will provide better surveillance support along our coastal borders. So we are aware of our vulnerability. Indeed, this is a reality of all island states in the Caribbean. We do not have enough resources to adequately cover all of our coastal areas. But in this particular setting, we are willing to contract support to assist our Coast Guard in this particular area. And the conversation has already been started with our Defense Force, our Lieutenant Colonel, Mr. Cumry, and private sector entities to see how we could further improve and enhance and defend our coastal borders.
Before I go back to the phone lines, though, AG, the question of the rationale behind the evening curfew, a caller said, lock the place down, the whole thing. What is your response to that?
Well, I think the Prime Minister very early established from the regulations that everyone should stay at home. But there is a window, an exception to those essential workers who must go to somewhere. That is basically it. So the curfew really is for everyone to stay at home. But if you have to look after the electricity or the water or telecoms or the radio, there are exceptions for those essential workers that are clearly established. And those people, as the Prime Minister said to Sister Sensia, you have to have an ID and preferably some sort of very clear identification, because you're liable to be stopped by security forces if you're wandering around on the streets. So that is the principle. But at the same time, as the Prime Minister has also said, people must live. So that if you're locked in your house for 2-3 days, or if you live by where you have to go out and buy a meal a day, you're either going to have to go during a short window, during the course of the day, to a takeaway facility, or to go to a supermarket and pick it up. And you have to be able to have that license to do so. So there are regulations in place to have you stay at home, but you may have to go out to go to these places to have these things involved.
Thank you very much, sir. Back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air, and a very good afternoon to you. You're live.
A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Backus.
Good afternoon.
Very good afternoon to the Honorable Prime Minister and our Attorney General, Mr. Byron. I'm calling from the Grange. I am Mrs. Pat Leader, the manager. I just want to say thank you very much for bringing this announcement out about not just the general public, but including care of the elderly. Because I personally have been struggling for the last 3 weeks to say to visitors, including relatives, that if you really love your relatives, try and do social sin. I was a little bit disappointed that the private homes were not mentioned. I noticed that Mr. Mark Brantley did mention all of the health facilities in Nevis. I think the ones in St. Kitts that were mentioned were just the government-owned thing. I'm sure that was not intentional. But we live in an island where people are not told directly and given directives specifically that they will say, well, it's only the government places. I would really like you to iterate and please put some emphasis on our private homes. I would be very, very grateful for that. But I do thank you for coming in and giving us the support. I thank you for the curfew that you've put in place. We are all in this together. it's caused me so much mental stress because every single one of my residents are in that 80%. And I really would not like them to suffer. We are doing our best, and the public also could help us. I just wanted to know, though, whether the 14 days lockdown also is for the nursing homes, which I'm sure you did say. But someone rang me to clarify it. Perhaps if you say it on national radio, it would help to reinforce and re-emphasize all that you're saying. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to get to the Prime Minister in just a moment. He's taking a few notes. He's going to speak to you shortly. Call you live and on the air. Thanks for holding. Go ahead, please. Hello, caller? We have a shy caller. Let's go back to the phone lines. Call you on the air. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Backus.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
And good afternoon to the Prime Minister and the Attorney General. So I have a concern. I'm a security officer down at Port Zante. And I would like to know what you all have in place for security officers who will be going down to work. Is this still on the curfew? Or they have to show up an ID, which we normally use to portray people to know that we are security officers? Because what I am hearing, that the shift is being shifting up with some of the people who normally supposed to be going into work, and people will be working extra shift and all sort of things. I would like you to clarify it for me and let me know and let the authority know what will be done about the security officers coming into work. Make sure they have a proper ID so they will be seen on the road by police officers or army men that they are people who are working for Port Zante, which is the urban development. Because up to now, I am confused and upset with what I'm hearing. So could you please clarify it for me, please?
All right, sir. Thank you very much. You'll get that clarification in a moment. Back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon. Hello.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
Hi, yes, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. You're live. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling on behalf of the St. Kitts students that are currently in the United States of America and other foreign countries. What are we doing as a nation for these students that are currently out in these foreign countries in dire situations of being out of jobs, unable to pay for their rent, unable to buy food, and unable to pay for utilities? What are we doing as a nation for these students? What are we planning to do for them?
Thank you very much for your question, ma'am. We'll take one more call and we go to get the responses. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Marcos.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to you.
And good afternoon, Mr. Honorable Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon, Honorable Attorney General. And good afternoon to you all listeners via radio. We just would like to get something in there, Mr. Prime Minister. I heard you make reference about this state of emergency address you put to the nation this morning. I didn't hear it off your hand, but I got a link with it. When I get a chance, I will listen to it properly. But I heard you state that is a new world order. You make an emphasis about a point about?
Well, it's a new circumstance in which we are dealing with. And certainly the pandemic has changed the world as we know it, from everything we have seen. Some of the new concepts that have come in vogue, social distancing, etc., etc., all these are part. The New World Order is really an expression representing that things have changed. So some of the things we could have done in yesteryear, we can't do now.
Okay, I would like to say something on that statement you just make reference to. We don't want to be a part of no new world order. We want to be a part of the creator status. And if we are to continue pursuing what the globalists want for us to implement to our citizens, our people alike, that means we are just following the money trail. We are not following the truth of the Almighty. Because if you're telling me now that this is a pandemic instead of epidemic, that means the people who are creating this virus are the people who are trying to eliminate the population growth. And there are a lot of people in this world who are consulting with these people because of the money. But we say it's time now we look to the nature of life and start working with natural herbs. We can't continue working with these people who are part of the agenda to create benefit to our people and then continue controlling our life by the laws and the regulations. But what about the creator laws? We don't want to see that in justice. It's time now people stop blindsided because of money. We want to be fair and truth. Yeah, fair and true, Mr. Prime Minister and Mr. AG. I have to follow the New World Order. They are part of the emphasis to destroy human beings. You all have a safe day. Love and honor and respect.
Love and respect, my brother.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the callers to hold off a bit. I did promise to get some responses from the Prime Minister and the Attorney General for you. So that's that time now, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Patricia Kingery Leader. She was one of our leading figures in private sector-driven healthcare services. And so she will always have a special place in my heart. And I want to thank her for continuing to do good work. Now, her kind of services, care for the elderly, certainly is well covered in the emergency powers COVID-19 regulations. And I shall ensure that you get a copy, Mrs. Leader. Regulation 14 imposed the same restriction that one has with respect to a patient at a hospital to a patient in a residential care establishment or facility, including an elderly nursing home. So your facility is covered under 14, subsection 1, subsection B. All areas where they are elderly, whether it is Sadler's or any other facility, the Cardin home, etc. Same standard we want and same standard we require those who are leading these facilities, manage them to comply with. And again, I know you are up to this, and I want to commend you for being a leader in these matters. So I commend you with respect to that. And we will never, never omit that important category of private sector entities engaged in providing support to our elderly, whom we love so much and we want the very best for. And I hope that those who come to visit you would give full compliance to the regulations and the protocols that you have put in place, for you have been a remarkable healthcare provider. With respect to the security officers, that too is covered under, I think it's Regulation 5 at K. Businesses licensed to provide security guard services are covered. And why is this so? Part of the rationale, whenever there is a curfew, there is increased demand for security. So security service become more in demand, and the coverage of them cannot just be left to the state. Private security providers then will be required, whether it is to enhance the security support of people in Port Sante, people in their private homes, businesses on 4th Street, etc. And this regulation, we have to commend the draft persons because they really were comprehensive in attempting to identify some of these essential services. Now, the caller made reference to the shift system. We can't get into that because we don't know the specific of every entity, but generally security service would involve some element of shift system. I would encourage you to have a discussion with either the owner of the facility or the supervisor and to see whether arrangements more to your liking would be mutually acceptable. With respect to the matter of students abroad were caught in a very difficult position, as were many other of our citizens and citizens elsewhere. When, for example, President Trump determined that he will lock down America, a substantial number of persons were caught. And we have to appreciate that things are evolving and evolve with such rapidity that a number of states had to respond at the moment in relation to these. And then it is always the delicate balance. You could open for as long until the last of your citizens come in, or you have to take decisions. In any event, some of those decisions were taken away from people because the airlines, out of their own self-interest, had to make a determination whether in the context of the travel advisory it made sense going to a number of jurisdictions. So that is that reality. Now, students are at different areas and they have different circumstances. Where students have concerns, we have said that we are fortunate to have our mission situated in most of the major democratic countries around the world. So in the United States of America, we have our embassy in Washington, D.C., and that is headed by Dr. Thelma Philip Brown. We have in New York our mission to the United Nations. We have in London our High Commission to the United Kingdom. We have in Taiwan an embassy that is there. We have in the United Arab Emirates. We have in the UAE, particularly in Dubai, we have our consulate office located in those regions. So, and then in Morocco, Africa, we have the OECS mission there, headed by a son of the soil, former commissioner, Mr. Ian Quealy. We also have at the OECS another joint mission of the OECS. And so our persons, if they are located in Europe, can contact the OECS missions and embassies located in Brussels. If you are in Africa, then you have the option, of course, of contacting our ambassador there, Ambassador Ian Quealy. And of course, if you're in the Middle East, we are present in the UAE. Indicate your specific concerns. I appreciate that over radio is not the best way in which to engage in terms of matters personal to you. But our support services, they're there, they have their Facebook page, and all of them should be having their social media outlets. Please make contact so that we can address the concern peculiar to you, because the situation in different countries certainly is in variation. It differs. We know, for example, in Taiwan, there's a very close relationship between our ambassador there and many of the students. We get regular update. And of course, if all of those are not responding, our missions in the end should respond to Kebas, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And she is one of the more experienced public servants, very easy to interact with. And again, I am sure, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, her contact particulars are available. We are willing to help where we can. I omitted to mention that in Canada, Ottawa, Canada, we have our High Commissioner there, Miss Sherry Truss. Again, she is very available, wanting to help. Whatever your concerns, I am certain that one of these functionaries is in a position to help or to advance the particulars of your situation for an important consideration. We want all of our citizens to be safe, and in the interim, we ask that you comply with all the health and other advisories pertinent to your particular jurisdictions. You try to keep yourself safe, and certainly whatever we can do within our limited resources, we certainly would want to do for our citizens everywhere.
We say good afternoon to you, sir. You're live on the air. Hello.
Hello there.
Hi. Yes, good afternoon. You're live on the air.
Yes.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Live in the air?
Yes, of course, you are. Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. I want to say good afternoon to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Attorney General, and yourself, Mr. Clive Backus. This is Bucky, got it. Yeah, I'm good. Prime Minister, I want to congratulate you because the persons have asked for your presence, and this is what you're doing, and this is what you ought to do for the nation, is to come and address the nation and tell them what steps, measures you are taking. And I would just encourage you to do so more often and to share more information to the media so we can put that message out there, because I've got a lot of questions, and once I have the information, I can disseminate it to my followers and the general public. There's too many false news going around. So even when sometimes when persons distribute things that you say, I have to verify it. They will come and say, Bucky, I just heard this on Win FM. Is it you? So I'm in a very high demand for verifying information, and I want to tell the people, stop sending false information. We're in a crisis right now, and we must follow the protocols. You was on the air early this morning, and already people still not quite understand what you said, and that's where the media come into play. So we can actually reiterate, continue to show the public the good works that the government is doing. There are steps that you are taking, because you can never please everybody. There's always somebody going to say something wrong. And what I see the government is doing is taking steps, taking measures to protect the people here in St. Kitts. And I want your comment on that. You're working, I don't even know where the government is finding the energy from. I want to acknowledge the Honorable Wendy Phipps. I have had reason to call her many times to verify stuff. And I personally don't like it. But we can only stop the false news and make the media work easier if we just listen to what the government is putting out there. There are other people who want to help, but by sending wrong thing and misleading information, saying that no, they get this from a nurse, they get this from somebody working in immigration, and when you do investigate, it's totally wrong. It makes media life hard, and it makes people trying to wonder, I wonder who is credible. I wonder if ZIZO is credible now. I wonder if Vincent is credible now. I wonder if Buck is really credible. Because there's so many false information circulating in the atmosphere, and we don't need that at this present time. So once again, thank you for coming on the air. You was there this morning, addressing the public. You're here again, and you can only do so much, but continue doing that work, continue giving the media the information so we can put it out there, because we are who the people are following. I could boast for myself and for the people believe in Bucky Get It, and they follow me. So continue feeding the information so I can feed the general public, and you be safe and your cabinet, and continue doing the good works. One of the questions persons are asking, I know this is not the time for that part, but is the stimulus package. A lot of persons want to know where can they apply, when they can apply. So I'll wait for these information to be distributed so I can let people know that you fall in this category or you fall in that category. And before I go, I want to encourage people, please, to abide by the rules. We in St. Kitts, we are very ignorant and stubborn. The Prime Minister is here again on Win FM to let the people know that the curfew is in place. Please don't open your shops. Please do not move about if you don't have to. You're going to get into trouble, and then we're going to see on some media that somebody have to get a little rough up, so to speak, because you don't want to adhere by the rules that the government have put out. So please, people, curfew is on, stay in your house. It is safer for you and for your family and friends. We need to live longer. You understand? So that's the most I can say, is tell people just abide by the rules. Government, thank you. PM, doing a wonderful job, and continue moving forward.
And thank you very much for calling and posing your comments as well. Our numbers are 4660989, 6620989, 762. Final round of callers, really, because we're going to have to wrap things up. The Prime Minister is extremely busy, and so is the AG. Let's go back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air, and good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Backus.
Yes.
And thank you for taking my call.
Yes, good afternoon,
And
Bob.
good afternoon to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Attorney General, and Mr. Samuel, who is there also. I have a question, and I'm not going to be too long with my question. What is the Ministry of Health is going to do with those folks that came in the country before the deadline of stopping the flights from coming into the country, when they came from places like the hotspots, places like France, Italy, United States, and Germany, and there might be lawyers and also doctors and other people. What are you going to do about them? You're going to test them, or you're going to find out if they have any type of signs of the virus, or put them in quarantine? Mr. Prime Minister, I sure if you leave the country and you go overseas, I sure when you come back to this country, you know you have to be tested right there at the airport. And you will know that you have to either be tested, and when you're tested and there's signs, you might just have to go into in quarantine, and somebody else will probably have to run the country, or you might have to run it from where you are. So what is the ministry is going to do about that? Those folks that came in before and did not get tested and did not go into quarantine, how are you going to deal with that situation? Thank you.
Thank you for calling, sir. Back to the phone lines we go. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Hey, back up, Milo. I just want to ask you.
Yeah, man. You're live, you know.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, man.
Hey, good afternoon. What I want to ask, right?
Yes.
Like how this is a curfew, right? I want to ask the Prime Minister, because I know things happen differently. So I want to know if this being a curfew, it is now going to be a case of we get an update from the Prime Minister, say every day, like you say, every day at 2 p.m., the Prime Minister will be on the radio giving the nation an update, right? My second question is this. Seeing that we have an emergency, I know some business places have been trying to do the social distancing, and part of what they've been doing is trying to send some of their workers on vacation. What I want to know, is it legal to send anybody on vacation during a state of emergency? And my last thing is, I know that we have this curfew from 7 to 5. What I want to know, because some people are saying that, the curfew is not working, we need a total lockdown, because from 7 to 5, people can still come out 5 o'clock and congregate. But my thing is this, what I believe is that we are being asked over and over to observe social distancing. So even in the time that you are not on the curfew, you cannot still be by a bar gathering, because if you're by a bar gathering, you're not observing the 6 foot distance or social distancing. But you see, people won't understand that, and sadly, everything has to be explained, right? Because even though you are not on curfew time, the fact that you have to be 6 feet away from everybody, it don't mean that you're only supposed to do that between 7 and 5, because at 7 and 5, you are supposed to be home, not on the street. Between 5 in the morning and 7 in the evening, whatever you are out to do, you're still supposed to be observing the social distancing. But since some people are not really understanding it that way, because I heard some people say, people will come out the next day then and gather together because only from 7 to 5 is the curfew. Please let them know there's curfew and then there's still social distancing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes, thank you for calling. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for taking my call. My name is Dr. Latoya Hart. I know that social distancing is very, very important, and we have definitely been encouraging everyone to stay home as much as possible, which is absolutely the right thing to do. I just want to talk a little bit about telemedicine. The United States has been relying heavily on telemedicine, which allows people to stay at home and see and talk to physicians online via via video conferencing and do e-consultations that way. We have a group of local doctors in St. Kitts that will be offering their services through www.heartglobalmedical.com. That way that you can stay at home if you're healthy and you don't want to go outside, or if you're ill and you want to protect others and you want to stay at home and you still need to consult a physician, you can go online to that website, heartglobalmedical.com, and see a physician. And if there are any physicians that are willing to team with us and provide your services online, please email us at ICARE, I-C-A-R-E, at heartglobalmanagement.com. Together, we can help to fight COVID-19. We can reduce the strain on the local hospitals and also on the emergency room for patients that do not need to go into the emergency room for minor illnesses. Again, heartglobalmedical.com, H-A-R-T, globalmedical.com, and you can stay safe in your home and still see a physician if you need to online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You're live. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good afternoon. I would like to ask the Prime Minister 2 questions.
Yes, he's listening.
Hello?
Yes, he's listening to you.
Okay, I would like to ask, for the government workers who would get laid off, would they continue getting their weekly salary or monthly salary? And for the supermarkets, gas stations, they are supposed to close at 5 p.m. daily?
Yes, go ahead. You're asking a question?
Yes.
Okay, all right. You get some responses in just a moment. Go ahead and pose your questions. I'm trying to get some calls in. Go ahead.
Yes, that's the 2 questions I have to ask.
All right. Thank you so much. You're going to have a response in a moment, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you for calling. Back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon.
Yes, Mr. Backus, I asked a question earlier. My internet dropped out. I didn't hear the answer. But anyway, we just had a previous caller who stated exactly the point I was making. There's the curfew in the night, and the same people are allowed to come out in the day to mingle with people, and that's the problem.
Well, what happened is that when your internet dropped out, the answer was given to your question that says that basically only essential services are allowed during the daytime. So the lockdown is still in effect. So it's not a night lockdown and a freeness in the day. It's one thing. It's a state of emergency. So the question was answered. So
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, well, I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, man, no problem. Back to the phone lines. Call you live and on the air. Good afternoon. Hello. All right, well, that's it. All right. Thank you for calling. I want to thank all the callers. We're going to go now to the Prime Minister and Attorney General for their wrap. I have one question to contribute. Somebody who is counting numbers asked me to ask you this question. Salaried people are paid in full, even if they are not available for work. Is there any consideration for any modification to the labor laws? Anybody know this is an accountant asking, right? You know that. Okay. Back to you, Mr. Prime Minister, and of course, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you very much. With respect to the caller who asks about the hours for the gas stations, those are outlined in regulation. I think it is 5D. Gas stations, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Those are the prescribed hours. We expect strict compliance with this. I want to make the point with respect because the caller also spoke to government workers being laid off. There is no such proposal at this time. So if someone says government workers are being laid off, that is fake news. The cabinet has not taken that decision. In fact, we have the greatest care for the workers, and that is why in the stimulus package that I announced, so much emphasis was being placed on assisting those who had become displaced, those who had lost earnings as a result of the consequences of the pandemic, to ensure that we provide them at least a breather and some additional income to help them to keep their head, if you will, above water, in a manner of speaking. So again, gas station hours 5 a.m. Let's get it here, 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. No plans now to lay off government workers. What we do ask is that government workers, like workers everywhere, be on their best in terms of their performance, their ethics, etc., so that the society at large benefits more and gets value for money from the service of every worker. I want to respond, and the age will perhaps add to it, to the caller who continues, as it were, appears confused about what is happening. Again, the regulation specifically is to impose restrictions on persons' ability to move. And only the persons identified as being essential workers are allowed to move within a defined period of time. And that is, as it were, a necessity, because there is nothing called lockdown in the sense of an absolute. Because when you say to a man, you can't get bread, which he has always had to have from his bakery, from his village shop, then what are you, as it were, force him into? It's not practical. When you say that I need to get health care, and you can't get health care, that is not a practical response. So we have to understand the relativity in relation to this. There's nothing called an absolute shutdown because, as it were, it just cannot work. When you need an ambulance, are you going to say then there is no driver, the ambulance can't move? Could that operate in a normal functioning society? So let's understand what it is. We are saying use good common sense. Stay at home unless there's a compelling reason to do so. And usually it is that your work demanded, your health situation demanded, or some other situation. We have gone so far to tell you not even to visit your family in the hospital as a precautionary health step. We have gone so far to tell you, as much as you love your granny or your mother at the residential home, do not go there because you could jeopardize not only your granny there or your mother, but the workers in that facility. In other words, isolate yourself as much as possible. And cardinal to this, and I repeated it, is that the regulations operate on the assumption that everyone is at home unless there is a persuasive reason for them to do so. And so I read in the beginning, and shall we read again? Regulation 7, shelter in place. Every person, that is what it starts with. Every person means everyone. Every person shall remain confined to their place of residence, including your yard space, to avoid contact outside the family. That is what it is. We are saying stay. Don't allow yourself to get confused with people gone to work and they will go back the next day. Of course that will happen if that is the nature of their job. There's nothing difficult about that. And that doesn't deny that there is a lockdown. But those persons are going out, like the police officer, like the nurse, like the ETMS, like the fire, because the nature of their job requires them to be there in the case you need them or another person need them. There's nothing abnormal about that and the concept. And that is why always there has been, whether in hurricane, the notion everybody get off the street. Everyone must get off the street once the hurricane is imminent. And I use that analogy. But who is out there? The policeman is still out there. The fireman is still out there doing their work to ensure your safety. And it is a similar situation. If it is not necessary for you to move, stay. And stop being too concerned about what your neighbor is doing. You just do the right thing. ensure that every member in your household is doing the right thing. And the regulation is very clear. Essential workers who are required to report to work. If you are not in that category or any of the others that follow, stay at home. Stay at home. Stay at home. That must be very clear. If you are a worker required to work on the regulation 4 and 5, and 4 and 5 start again with the assumption that you stay at home unless somebody call you. Who can call you? If you are working with the government, then the cabinet secretary will determine that we need you today. So then you have a reason for not staying at home. Otherwise, the rule is stay at home unless there's an overriding reason for you not to stay at home. Who else may call you? If you are in a state-owned enterprise, the chairman of that entity could then draw up the list of those persons who are required to come to work. And then 5, subject to any relevant, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court practice direction, the court shall remain accessible, shall adhere to physical distancing protocols, and the persons employed within the public service shall work remotely from home as far as reasonably possible. So for me, this is very clear, and there's no need for confusion. Start first, I should stay put unless I am an essential service worker. And if I am an essential service worker, I must have an ID. And I will go so far to say some supporting letter to show that you have good reason to be on the road. Other than that, stay at home. If you have to go to the doctor, of course we have to let you pass. So again, essential to travel to the doctor, the grocery store, the bank, etc., because we have been encouraging people to bank rather than hold money at home. So the legislation provides for that. If you have to go to get a little exercise, we say do it, not do it anytime. Do it between 5 a.m. And of course, in doing it, you must maintain the 6 feet distance. So everything here has been reasonably put. The country is in a lockdown of sort where only persons appropriately designated can move around freely. That is what we have. And I am saying, do not confuse yourself. Unless you have a direction from an appropriate authority, you should stay at home. Avoid the shops, avoid the bars. That is what this is saying. Stay at home at least for 14 days. I will allow the Attorney General to add respect to that, and then I'll come back to say a word with respect to the doctor who called and to speak about telemedicine.
Yes, Prime Minister, just to emphasize that the idea is, as he says, in Regulation 7, the shelter in place, and in an effort to prevent the spread of novel coronavirus, COVID-19, every person shall remain confined to their place of residence, inclusive of their yard. We are getting questions too, I must say, Clive, and one question was, can we go after 7 o'clock and go for a walk?
No.
And in the regulations it says you're supposed to be at home.
Right.
But if you want to get to exercise between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., you can go to walk and take a walk on the road or in your yard. But remain distant from other people. You don't walk in a group. You don't walk with everybody hug up, because you're sweating and the fluids can be what can spread this thing. So there has to be this practicing of social distancing, physical distancing. So if you want to take a walk, you do it during the course of the ZIZOnline for a short while, because you should be at home. But after 7, you should not be on the street. Basically, that's the idea. And I agree with the Prime Minister again that these are some of the issues. So the concept that curfew means that everybody at home 24 hours and you don't come out at all. Some people do not have the wherewithal to store food for 14 days. So you have to come out in the day, briefly, to collect some food and go back home. So you can't be on the street for that. If you don't have any money, you have to go to the ATM or bank. You must practice social distancing then. So we have to line up outside the bank. You're not up on everybody. You give everybody a 3-6 feet space. Be reasonable. Be thoughtful. You don't want to connect it. Let's be frank. This thing spreads when we come into contact with each other, when we interact with each other, close spaces. And so what the Prime Minister has been very clear in everything he has been saying, give us all space if you have to travel, if you have to move around, if you have to go to something, have that social distancing. But the general principle is for 14 days, and we pick 14 days because this is the incubation period of the virus. So from today, for 14 days, those who will come and get it, if God forbid, that the virus takes hold on somebody, at the end of 14 days, we know who those are. We can isolate them and take care of them. The others we feel should not be in that pool. So they can then be given, as it were to be. We have to reevaluate in 14 days. It may be that we may have to extend it, but we have not become there yet. 14 days. We say give it a chance to peak, let us get it under control, and ensure that our health services are not inundated and can't handle an explosion. We want to control, and the Prime Minister has been very, very careful and proper in telling our people this is what we are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to quickly speak to the reordering of the world, which my friend Pastor Ayer spoke to. And clearly what we are talking about is a reordering of the normal flow where everyone can largely go where he or she wishes without restriction. In the context of what we are facing, there are restrictions. And I want to go back again to an important one, which I got a WhatsApp question on, and that is Regulation 8. It says all religious and educational places of instruction or worship shall remain closed. So to the person who asks, can the church still be open for normal, regular worship? The answer is no, save again there are exceptions. The exception says that subsection 1, subregulation 1, does not prohibit any activity referred to therein by electronic or virtual means. And what this is saying, the church can still go on, but do it virtually. Not in the usual, all of us come nicely dressed, sitting in the pews and on the benches on Sunday, but by using telecommunication services, call it virtual means or electronic means, the service is still happening. The pastor may come to Win FM, the pastor may go to ZIZ Radio, and he does what it is will normally done, but not in the same context. So that is a reordering of the way in which we fellowship and worship. And I want to go to be individual attendance at a place of worship for private individual prayer while practicing social distancing and physical distancing. And what that is doing really, and again I want to commend the draft persons, these are not weaknesses. This shows that this is a strong, powerful law that is flexible enough to do what must be done to keep our country safe, keep our people far apart for reasons of health, while still allowing some sense of regularity and sensitivity to our culture and religious life. Because we are praying people, at least I am. And it says if you as an individual want to go to the Pentecostal church in Tabernacle where I live, you can do so, but not with no crowd of people. If you want to go to the Catholic church to pray, we welcome prayer. We welcome that outreach to God. You can go as a private individual to do your prayer, but observe social distancing and physical distancing. And importantly, quickly I go to 9. No person, and these are part of the change order, no person shall host or attend a private party, which includes any person from outside the immediate household. Again, sticking to a confined area. It is your birthday, you can no longer go someplace and have this big party, whether by the pool or elsewhere. It cannot be done. The police will intervene, and it cannot be done at least for 2 weeks in the first instance. And what is the rationale? We are trying to save lives. We are trying to prevent people from getting sick. Yes, 80% of them will recover naturally. But what about the 20%? What about the overcrowding that could happen in our hospitals, so that those who really are in need of serious care become a member of a queue? We do not want that. So we are doing this in a way to help our people live a better life and live longer. No recreational or competitive sporting events or other types of public entertainment. So no band, no dances, no kind of public entertainment can happen now. This is a change order that is happening. A wedding cannot host 10 or more persons other than the bride, the bridegroom, and the official witnesses and the marriage officer. This is new. When you have a wedding, the normal thing, as many as you can afford or can invite, let them come. The law is now putting a restriction on it. And we were hoping, as it were, that we would not have had to come to this. But there is a broader public good, because as the Attorney General spelled it out, every person who becomes infected, you have a cascading impact, a multiplier effect to all the other persons with whom he or she would have become in contact with. You now have to go and trace, instead of one, maybe thousands of people, tying up vital, limited resource in ways that we could ill afford. The banquet hall and the ballroom and the reception, those are not allowed. Any other ceremony in any facility or public place which involves the participation of a member of the general public, if it is going to be larger than 10, that also is restricted. No weddings. In fact, funeral now should not have more than 10 members of the immediate family and at least one officiant and a central mortuary. These are part of the changing times. They are harsh, yes, but they are necessary. And all we are asking the public to do not fret over them. They are necessary for your own life, for the life of others, and for a period of just a mere 14 days. You could count it on one hand, 2 hands, 3 hands, 3 fingers, you get 15. 14 days for the rest of your life. Abide by these and be a man, a woman of honor, so that our country could defeat this virus and we could go back to normalcy. That is part of the reordering which the pandemic has bring. And listen now to how the future is going to be different. We got 2 examples. The doctor called to talk about now going online, telemedicine, getting your diagnosis. After this period, everywhere in the world, telemedicine will become more popular. After what we are now imposing in terms of working at home, it'll be difficult to stop this. So this is going to become a new normal. So we are seeing now important opportunities. While there are challenges, while it will be an uphill battle, we are also seeing new opportunities for growth and for activity. And perhaps the final point I wish to make is the one that Bucky got it raised, the propaganda. How bad that could be. The Director General of the World Health Organization has said that the propaganda is just as dangerous as the virus. And you wonder what it is. Some persons are hoping to achieve. First, they want St. Kitts to have as much corona as possible. What prize do they win for that? What is the objective in that scaremongering? And secondly, they attempt to undermine the integrity of the health system and the integrity of professionals and our National Task Force and our Chief Medical Officer. They attempt to do that with regard to testing. The truth is St. Kitts and Nevis has done more testing on a per capita basis than a lot of countries, big and small. Here it is, you had the challenge in the largest and most successful country in the world, the United States of America, in terms of testing. And some persons with unpatriotic motive are attempting to cast aspersion against what has been a success story in St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to make the point we have only 2 confirmed cases by large statistics. This country has no reason to hide anything, and this country cannot hide anything because the tests have always to be verified by a designated approved body, which is CARFA. CARFA does not reside here. CARFA is an independent authority, internationally respected. So when CARFA puts out its information, it is that which the CMO reports. I heard our CMO said that she has an international obligation to report results within 24 hours. So why is it people keep creating scenes? They're 11, they're 9, they're 39. Fake news. And we have to all condemn it. And I want to thank the St. Kitts Christian Council, thank the St. Kitts Evangelical Association, which today all came out yesterday and today to commend the work of the National Working Group, Task Force, and COVID-19, headed by the good brother Abdia Samuel and his team, because always it is a team effort for their wonderful work. What we really need to be doing is commending our sons and daughters who are having sleepless days with the limited resources that we have, attempting to bring focus, direction, guidance to our St. Kitts and Nevis. It is a mark still of high honor that our very small team of patriotic sons and daughters were able to keep the virus at bay for as long as possible, so that we are now regarded as a country with some best practices, because we were the last in the Americas to have had a confirmed case with respect to the virus. So I want to commend you, Mr. Samuel, and commend the team and all others who are working hard. And to say a special thank you to the good citizens. The cable has done some good work, recognizing in the work at home, new dispensation. You will need free internet services. They are going to provide hotspots everywhere. I hope not only in the city, but in the rural parts, they will be providing that. I want to thank them. Flo has stripped in and offer certain services. I say thank you. Private individuals like Reggie Francis have provided support, equipment to our people. I say thank you. And internationally today, importantly, some 35 or thereabout health specialists are coming from Cuba. 310 today should be coming to St. Kitts and Nevis to help boost our health response. They are coming because we have planned it. They're coming because while others were busy making mischief, we were quietly and calmly doing what was necessary to protect the country, contain it in the first instance, and once it comes, to have the quickest opportunity for recovery.
Mr. Prime Minister, I'd like to thank you very much. I want to go to Mr. Samuel briefly. Mr. Samuel, can you remind our listeners and be joined by our colleague stations where they can get reliable information? And if someone would like to have questions answered, do you have a line they can call to say, I heard the Prime Minister say this, I'm not sure what that means. What does it mean? Is there such a phone number or access point?
Yes, Mr. Bacchus. We established the hotline, which was a critical tool that we needed in order to share information. And 311 is the number. It's up and running. If you call 311, you will have someone there who will answer the phone. Also, the Information Technology Department has been working assiduously, and I want to acknowledge Ms. Blanchard, who has been working day and night to ensure that by the beginning of the week, we are going to have situation reports online. We're going to have a portal where you're going to have all the statistics necessary from the Ministry of Health and the National Task Force to be able to inform the general public. And also, you can also go onto the NEMA website. You can also go to the Health Promotion Unit on Facebook, and you will get information there. And also, you can go onto ZIZ. ZIZ has a link, which is the COVID-19 link. And once you go there, you get all the information that are coming from all the reputable sources. And also, it's very important to note that you can get the information from CARPHA, World Health Organization, and also the Pan American Health Organization. These are all the relevant agencies that you can get credible information and responsible information from, Mr. Bacchus.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And AG, you can't just sit down just like that. You have to say something. You're leaving now. A quick goodbye.
Yes. I just want to reinforce some of the regulations that have been gazetted today. Clearly, a proclamation was gazetted, as I said at the beginning, was issued by His Excellency Sir S.W. Tapley-Seton, the Governor General, and that proclamation establishes the state of emergency in our country. Yes. That is based on the Constitution, Section 9 of the Constitution, 19 of the Constitution, and there's also the Emergency Powers Act. I think that, just to be clear, the Emergency Powers Act was first established, made Act number 22 of 1969. So it goes all the way back to then and came into force the 1st of December 1970 and has been in place so that it also gives meat to that constitutional provision. And our quarantine regulations that are also have been raised and have been already gazetted some weeks ago, these come from the Public Health Act that gives the Minister of Health the authority to establish quarantine regulations. So there are quarantine regulations. There's now a quarantine form that we would want all those under quarantine to sign to show that they would adhere to those regulations. Otherwise, there will be that basis to bring some form of action when they violate those regulations. Just to be clear again, I want to assure all our citizens that there is a good stock of food available on island, in our supermarkets and our wholesalers. They've assured us they have up to 2 months, almost 2 months worth of food in stock, and boats come every week. Just this week, we know we had over 120 containers of food on the shipping lines, Crowley, Tropical, King Ocean, that keep coming all the time. The ports that come out of Miami have not closed, and so we are being fed constantly every week with cargo ships and so forth. Also to emphasize too, that commercial courier flights are still open, are still be allowed to come, although we have restrictions on visitors coming into our country by the airports. We do allow FedEx and other courier flights are still operating. They will be able to bring needed supplies, medical supplies, other supplies, as well as emergency medical flights. Allowance will be made for that, and other cargo flights, as I say, are available to us. The regulations are wide. They cover as much as possible, but if there is some area, for instance, where they do not cover, the Commissioner of Police does have the authority with written approval to allow that to happen. And I can speak specifically, say, to cleaning agencies, businesses, because that in itself could well be considered an essential service. And once, if they're not covered in the regulations, the Commissioner of Police can give approval, written approval to cleaning services, companies, and so forth, so that we can still continue to have the bare necessities of life in our country. So the regulations cover a wide gamut of issues involved, and we are comfortable that we should be able, with the help of God, to be able to constrain this virus that is knocking at our doors.
And Mr. Prime Minister, I know you just say goodbye, but I have to say hello again because I have a question for you. I'm listening to this. It's all new to everybody. Everybody's trying to try to absorb everything that's being said. It may be too early to ask the question, but I'll ask it anyway. What do you see as one or two lessons coming out of this experience that could permanently impact St. Kitts and Nevis in a positive way?
Thank you very much. I think one clear lesson to me, and again, is the admiration I have for the excellent support we have had from our technical team, whether they were the officers of the Ministry of Finance who work with me day after day, and in the end, St. Kitts and Nevis gave a stimulus like no other country in the region had been able to do. Comprehensive. Every sector, as it were, was touched by that particular stimulus package. So my own confidence in our people has been enhanced. That I know that in the end, when difficult times, all we have is ourselves, are ourselves. And we have to have more trust and respect for one another. And the professionalism of our people is second to none. So hooray for the country. The second important lesson that I have had from this is that through all these difficulties, if we are really to continue the task of nation building, we have to look for opportunities. Trials will come, and many have come to us in St. Kitts and Nevis. And at times we may get battered, thrown to the ground. But we must have, as it were, the perseverance and the courage to take up the pieces and to start again. And whatever may happen in the end, when the story of the coronavirus is over, it must be a story that inspire every young man and every young woman, that the generation that come after us would have had a cadre of leadership that understood that we are there to serve for such a time like this, and having, as it were, risen to the occasion, have created a space for the consolidation and the enlargement of the freedom of people in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I say that to go back to the example of the telemedicine. I say that to go back that from all that we are going through, the new method of socialization, new opportunities have come. And one critically is that over the last perhaps 40 years, St. Kitts and Nevis has not paid enough attention to food security. We came from the legacy of sugar. And when sugar was king, there was no prince. there was no orphan, there was nothing but sugar. Sugar has now died for St. Kitts and Nevis. We now need to ensure the fruits and the vegetables and fish and all the other things that are required, because ultimately it is the country that controls a significant portion of what is required for its existence will be resilient and able to pick up the pieces again. And I, as the Prime Minister going forward, will attempt to give even more resources, because when the boats stop coming, we must have yams and potato and carrots and mango and guava, and you go down the long list. At the very least then, our people must be able to live a healthy life. Those, for me, are some of the important lessons going forward. My love for my country has become even greater as a result of this challenge and the incredible support from the church. The Chamber has written commending us on our stimulus package, and all I will call the thinking citizens, independent-minded citizens who see what this is doing to the world and to see how St. Kitts and Nevis is attempting to maneuver to a better spot. To God I give all glory, and I thank the people. I want to thank Senator Phipps as a lead minister in health and this particular matter. And I got a WhatsApp said I omitted Digicel. My apologies to Digicel and all others. And I want to add on the list of commendable corporate entities, WinFM, for so readily agreeing to help us better advance public education and information by having myself and the Attorney General today and the head of the task force to explain what better example of accountability could our country have. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris and Attorney General Vincent Byron, Mr. Abdius Samuel, National Coordinator of NEMA. We wish you well, sir. Make sure you get some rest and make sure you stay hydrated. The road is long.
It's a long way to go.
It's a long way to go.
Long way to go. The
Thank you very
good news, the Cuban aircraft, I gather, is now on the ground and have brought additional health resources to our country. Thanks to the government and people of Cuba. Even in their moment of challenge, they have shown the broader pan-Caribbean vision, and we are beneficiaries.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Bacchus?
Yes, sir.
Just one thing, I would like to inform all that the regulations are now published on ZIZOnline, and you can get there and read them, and they will be disseminated widely.
And they begin today.
They begin today. They're already there, posted. So we can go and read them for ourselves.
Excellent.
And that would be available in as many outlets as possible.
Thank you so much.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
You.
And that's the program for today. The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris, the Attorney General, Mr. Vincent Byron, the National Coordinator of NEMA, Mr. Abdius Samuel, appearing on Inside the News to answer your questions and to let you know exactly what a state of emergency means and, of course, what is required of you. Thanks to our participating stations as well. And we bid you goodbye and wish you a good afternoon. Inside the News came to you compliments the Cable and TDC Group of Companies.
In our pledge to keep everyone connected while helping to lessen the economic impact